South Australians will today decide between Stephen Marshall's Liberal government and Peter Malinauskas Labor Party. Here are 5 things to know about the election. COVID is still a big deal. South Australians might be going to the polls, but plenty won't be going anywhere. Escalating COVID numbers mean almost 22,000 people are in isolation, and about 3 times that many are in quarantine as close contacts. The voters in that group will have to collect postal ballot papers from one of 22 rapid antigen test sites to exercise their democratic rights. How the pandemic plays out in the poll will be fascinating to watch. Australian voters have returned their governments at every state or territory election from March 2020 until now. The Marshall government was widely praised for its COVID-19 response, which put public servants like Police Commissioner Grant Stevens and Chief Public Health Officer Nicholas Spurrier at the front of decision-making. First-term Premier Stephen Marshall spent much of the past 2 years performing as MC-in-Chief at press conferences alongside that pair. Police Commissioner Grant Stevens and Chief Public Health Officer Nicholas Spurrier have been front and center during the pandemic. But he reclaimed center stage in time for the state's border opening to the eastern states on November 23, which coincided with the arrival of the highly transmissible Omicron strain of COVID-19. The ensuing restrictions on households and businesses, some of which were lifted only a week out from Election Day, have caused the government political pain. The government's now the underdog. The Omicron shock is just one reason Stephen Marshall's Liberals start the election race behind. Recent polls, The Australian and Newspoll, have shown strong swings to Labor, with opposition leader Peter Malinauskas the preferred premier. After 16 years in the political wilderness, Stephen Marshall's Liberals were elected in 2018 with 25 seats in the 47-seat House of Assembly. But the Premier ends his first term leading a minority government with just 22 seats, the same number his party held in opposition. Former Liberal MPs Sam Julich, Dan Cregan and Fraser Ellis are now independents in the House of Assembly. A series of shocks saw 3 Liberals depart during the term of government. Sam Julich was forced out of the party when he was charged with assaulting an upper house MP at a Christmas party. He was later acquitted. Another backbencher, Fraser Ellis, was forced to quit while he fights charges of rorting his expenses. And a third MP, Dan Cregan, quit the party acrimoniously before ascending to the Speaker's chair in a midnight coup that unseated fellow Adelaide Hills-based colleague Josh Teague. With boundary changes factored in, ABC election analyst Anthony Green is putting Labor's starting point at 20 seats and the Liberals at 23. That means both parties need to gain ground to govern in their own right. Where it will be won and lost. A uniform 2% statewide swing will win the election for Labor, but swings are seldom uniform. The obvious battleground will be the 4 Liberal marginal seats in metropolitan Adelaide, Elder, Newland and King. If the opinion polls are reflected on the night, all 4 seats could fall to Labor. But politics watchers will be mindful of the past. In 2010 the Liberal Party secured a strong swing towards it, but Labor successfully sandbagged key marginal seats to retain power. Independent MP Troy Bell is tipped to comfortably retain his seat in the state's southeast. Will it be Independence Day? Further complicating the calculations will be the fate of the former Liberal-turned-independents discussed above, along with a 4th, Mount Gambier MP Troy Bell. Mr. Bell, like York Peninsula-based Fraser Ellis, appears likely to comfortably hold his seat. That's despite each defending corruption charges that could force them from the Parliament if convicted. Dan Cregan appears to have a strong foothold in his Hills-based seat of Cavill. The Liberals will be hopeful of securing the seat of Waite back from Sam Julich, and it could secure them victory, but only if they achieve the difficult task of retaining every other seat they hold, including the 4 marginals. Former Labor MP Francis Bedford is running as an independent in the seat of Newland. Then there are 2 other sitting independents, who are contesting new seats. Former Labor MP Francis Bedford has added a layer of interest by fighting both major parties for the state's most marginal seat, Newland. Jeff Brock, who served as a minister in the Wetherell Labor government, is taking on Deputy Premier Dan Van Holst Pelican in the northern seat of Stewart. That means lots of permutations and options in the event of a hung parliament. While Labor would ordinarily expect to retain the support of Brock and Bedford, and the Liberals Julich and Ellis, the voting intentions of Cregan and Bell could prove interesting. Labor has promised significant spending in the seats of both former Liberals, and the Liberal Party appears to have so far ignored Bell's warnings that his support cannot be taken for granted. It could take some time to work out what happened. In the event of a hung parliament, it would obviously take some time to establish who could form government. But another factor could mean a long wait for a result if margins are tight. The pandemic has helped drive an expected record number of more than 172,000 pre-poll and 162,000 postal ballots. Under South Australia's unique electoral arrangements, those votes will not begin to be counted until the Monday after polling day. Whether we get a result on Saturday or not, it's going to be a fascinating contest.